So other diseases have nicknames, such as individuals with cystic fibrosis calls themselves CFers. What do you think about the term sickler? Do you think it's a word that should be reclaimed or kind of left by the wayside?
So
I prefer warriors, but
let
but
me
I think
adjust myself in the chair. You know, I think that we have to remember that we all live in the world in Black and brown bodies, and as Black and brown individuals, it behooves those who create the narratives to give us labels. And there is an entire dog whistle politics around, using these key words that mean something to one person and something else to another, but when you assign them to particular groups. For example, if you have something that is frowned upon in society, it's often said that you've been given a label. But if you have something that is celebrated in our society, you're given a title, right? They're kind of the same thing, right? But the narrative around them is very different. So when we already carry the narrative of being less than, of being, and I don't subscribe, nor do I need their approval to be who I am, and I don't have to prove it to anybody. However, I know that that is how they shape their narratives, and that's how they use their dog whistle language to describe us without the less knowing understanding what they are truly, the box they're putting us in. So words matter, and the CFers, as they would prefer to be called, may feel a sense of identity and community around that. And I would challenge us to be mindful of the whole reclaiming certain words. We know that the N word is used as, and it's the A versus the ER and versus the narrative is the narrative that works against us, not for us. And we actually contribute to that narrative by continuing to use it flippantly. So, I just feel the same thing about the word sickler. I am more than my diagnosis, and I don't want that myself, my son, or anyone else to be known by a healthcare condition, no different than I don't want to be known by any particular degree I have. Is it nice? Is it part of who I am? But it doesn't define me. My humanity, if I didn't have any of that, I am still worthy. I am still valuable. I still am meant to be here.
Do I need to add anything after Rae? Because she just taught, like, that was a whole sermon. I despise the word sickler. I despise it. I despise it because I hate this culture that we have of trying to take a word that never was meant to empower anyone. The term sickler was, just as Rae said, it was a term given to us because, especially in the U.S., because they already had this stigma on us as sickle cell is a Black disease. So I'm not going to say niggas, but they sicklers, right? And I know a sickler is that Black person over there that's coming in, and that's what. And so the whole trying to change the narrative and change the narrative to empowerment with this word, it's just null and void for me, because you don't have to do that. You don't have to link yourself to that word in order to stand out, and so in order to be an advocate, in order to amplify your voice. You are much more than sickle cell disease, even if that's a big part of your identity, right? I am much more than sickle cell disease SS, right? And it stands true with everything that I do. I took over 5,000 young boys to the Million Man March, to the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March as an activist. That had nothing to do with my sickle cell disease. That's all because I just know how to mobilize and organize. I am much more than sickle cell disease. So why would I attach a label to myself when I do much more, than that? I'm not a sickler. I don't sit here and sickle all day. That's not what I am. And I always correct healthcare workers when they put that label on me.
I was
And
gonna ask, what about the people who say it harmlessly, and then also just
I still
subculture?
do
You
it.
know,
No
I don't
harm.
know if
Yeah,
They
in
say it
Ghana call
ignorantly, not
themselves sicklers,
harmlessly.
in
yeah,
Nigeria we call
and
ourselves sicklers.
yeah, and I can tell you, I had an experience. It was Christmas Day in Trinidad, and I got real sick, and I had to go. And I had the option of going to the public hospital or going to a private doctor. And my auntie was like, get her to the public hospital because it's closer and it looks like her hemoglobin is dropping. I was extremely sick. And I had this little teeny weeny nurse come in. She said, "How long you been a sickler?" And everything in me, I popped up. I was wide awake now. And I was like, "What you just call me?" I was like, "I am not a sickler." And my dad told me to calm down because he was like, "It's the culture." So this is the culture and the Caribbean. And I was like, "No, Dad, like I'm not calming down. Like that's wrong, right?" Y'all calling me a nigga to my face because that's how I felt when she said sickler to me and asked me how long have I been a sickler. So one, you was ignorant just on sickle cell disease, period, asking me how long I had it, and then two, you was ignorant and calling me a sickler. So you placed the label on me. So it's just that whole throw it in the trash. I want us to just trash it.
All right, I'm gonna mess this up, but I'm not gonna totally mess it up. So I still prefer warriors to sickler.
Yeah.
And my reason being that to use the word, my issue with sickler is just that it has the word sick in it, and to link that to an attribute of my identity, just even subliminally to use that over and over is almost just like it's
the word
almost
crisis.
like, yeah, well, yeah, it's like, it's almost like to just associate sickness with yourself. And the thing I constantly try to convey to people with young adults with sickle cell that I mentor is that you have it. I have sickle cell. It is one dimension of my identity. It is not all of my identity. Now, that being said, here's where I'm going to muck it up a little bit. There's a part of me that, as I was alluding to kind of with the lemons and whatever, like it's as much, I have to recognize that there is as only the power that we give it, right? And so I love the distinction you made about Rae, about titles versus labels, right? And I think a perfect example is the notion of like a frequent flyer. Under any normal circumstances, that's a sign of status, that's a sign of prestige, that's a sign of, you are a person who has arrived. But the moment we end up in the ER, that term gets applied to us as a pejorative.
That's
so,
right.
So the same word, it could be sickler, it could be frequent flyer, it could be used as a positive or as a negative, and it's only in the power that we give it, right, that it now becomes, so in a certain sense, we decide whether or not we are going to receive it as a positive or as a negative. And so that might be a little too close to home. So I always like to give an example that's kind of, we can maybe take a step back. There's this band that was in some legal proceedings and went to the Supreme Court. Their members are primarily Asian, and the name of the band was called the Slants. And so if you know the history, slants would be a pejorative term to apply to Asians, but they were trying to essentially repurpose it and say, no, this is going to mean what we say it means. In the same way, I think the Black community, when you talk about using the N-word, how you use it, it's a repurposing of something that might have been initially harmful into something that is something different. Whether they actually achieve that, I think they won their case in the Supreme Court, if that matters. But I know this is a debate that could go on forever, but I'll say for me personally, I'm less hung up on the use of the term sickler because I just choose to not give it that power. But in as much as there are people who may not draw that distinction, I don't want to wish any form of sickness or anything close to it to them. So
I guess I have to give an answer.
Did I sufficiently muck it up? I see grimaces coming from Rae to here. I'm like, they're like, like I hear what you're saying, but no. No.
I still love you though.
Terry, break the tie. No, it's not really a
tie,
tie, but we're
to disagree with your family.
I think my opinion is almost unique because I hadn't heard of the term really before until I was in my early 30s, I believe. Wow. Hadn't really heard it. And if I did, it may have been, once or twice, never in any large amount. And so it was actually a very good friend of mine when I was in North Carolina. While I was at Duke, I lived in a house that was cut into apartments, and it was called the Bridges Points Apartments. And people who were transitioning from, into adulthood, it was a transitional place. It didn't really end up that way, but that's what it was supposed to be. But anyway, all the people that lived there had sickle cell. And one of my very good friends, probably one of my best friends now, he hated the word. And I was like, what, but why? And I think it just doesn't sound good. Kind of like Phil is saying, it's got the word sick in it. And I think that really does bother people, the way that it sounds. And the way, even when I think about it, I'm like, oh, that does kind of sound, but I had nothing where, the word sound like a negative, word that someone was using towards me. I didn't have any of that in my life before. So, I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, why is it so bad? And so I think that does, so when I hear a lot of other people talk about the term and how it has its history and it labels you, I'm like, well, Warriors is a label, is it different because someone else gave it, or that if we named ourselves Warriors? Is that what the difference is? Or I don't get it.
What if the nurses and the ED said, hey, there's a warrior in room 7 versus, hey, there's a sickler in room 9? I just think that it shapes the way that our society moves and the way that our society communicates. I think that, again, words matter, both for the person using them and the person receiving them. And just because you can receive it different doesn't mean that it doesn't negatively empower the person using it.
It empowers the person that's using it. Okay. So, I and the only place that I ever figured that, you would really hear the word would be actually in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So basically it's doctors and nurses giving this term, and therefore it's negative because it means black. Like, I don't understand what is it pointing to? What is it? I don't understand how it's
a medical dog whistle. It's a medical dog whistle.
Why can't I just be
empower?
Right, but why can't I just be, as in the same scenario that Rae just gave? There's a patient who has sickle cell disease in room 9.
That's fine,
right? Absolutely. Or Tahirah is in room 9.
That's fine too.
Right. So you don't even have to give me no label. You don't even say my name.
I agree. I actually that above all. But when I heard the first time I heard people using the word warriors, I didn't actually like it.
I kind of still. That's why I might muck it up there if we had a warrior.
I'm still on the fence.
I was like, you know what? If there's going to be something, I'll take that one. I can ride with that.
Right.
So, I can ride with it, but I'm still on the fence with warrior, and that's just my own individual thing. I don't feel like a warrior every day for you to tell me or call me that. But that's my own.
I thought that was just me to hear.
No.
I don't like patient. Especially since I spend most of my life outside the hospital, and I'm still referred to as a patient. I'm a patient in the hospital, but I live most of my life outside the hospital. So
we made that a point with like our content that we were putting out as Crescent, and especially like on our website, we call ourselves survivors. We refer to our peers as survivors. And that just comes that I feel like that's what we're doing. You know, we're surviving, we're striving, you know, we're thriving with sickle cell disease.
Yes.
And that's the energy that we want to put out there,
Yes.
right? I'm not a patient every day. Right. I'm not a patient right now. I'm not in the hospital, but I am someone surviving sickle cell disease. I am someone living with sickle cell disease. I am someone striving daily, you know, with my entire life living with sickle cell disease. So, and thriving, you know, I do a lot and thriving. So, you know, and that's the type of energy I want to put out there. And that's the type of energy I want to receive. So when you place a word like Sickler on me, it takes me to another place. And I just automatically get images of the
sickle.
The tool sickle. And then just like you said, Phil and Terry, it has the word sick in it. And right now I don't feel sick.
Right.
So I don't even want that label nowhere near me.
And I think
because it can turn into a mindset.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the thing.
It changes your whole mindset. Psychologically, you go somewhere else, you know? And it's like someone dropping a seed into you, you know, subliminally. And now you then went into a depression mode and everything. Leave that energy far away from me.
Second, so that's the main thing again for me, and it's just kind of a reiteration of the point I was making. The fact that it has the word sick in it is almost like, for one, it's almost this suggestion. And again, it may be subliminally just via the use of the word, but it's the suggestion that because you have it, you are somehow not viable. You know what I mean? That you can't survive and that you can't thrive. And that is not, I don't even want to infect anybody's thinking with that notion. But, you know, I was a philosophy major, so my philosophy of language explanations aside, the reason point why this will probably end the debate is that it's not HIPAA compliant, right? And so if the nurses are using it in the ER to refer to instead of saying somebody with sickle cell is in that room, well, that's a violation of HIPAA when they could have said your name, you know. And so it's interesting that for CFers, they've gravitated towards it, right? I think that to me underscores the notion that you can make it a positive and it doesn't have to be a negative, even though it's a violation of HIPAA, that's what they're okay with identifying in that way. But I think, so that HIPAA component is what ends it. But warrior for me is better in the sense it's not inherently a HIPAA violation. There are other chronic illnesses that refer to themselves as warriors. So to use that doesn't necessarily give away what your diagnosis is. And it could also be referring to you but being a veteran. You know what I mean? It could be, you know, so it's vaguer in that sense. But also the mindset is one where you're potentially much more a warrior, you know, could be victorious. You know what I mean? Whereas a sickler is like it's already defeatist in its mindset. You know, to use it or not to use it, these are things to consider. They're interesting, but I do have my issues with HIPAA though. If our philosophical conversation gets to this, maybe this is due for a part 2. I think HIPAA sometimes in some ways can promote stigmatization, right? You know, we do have to. The fact if we don't talk about it or if we are restricting how we talk about what we have can inadvertently do that, right? Inadvertently contribute to the sense of stigma. And we know that that's from the newborn screening conversation, that's a challenge too. So HIPAA, that's not to say my view that HIPAA is 100% sacrosanct, but if that's how the nurses are going to refer to it, they should be leery of that.
That's an interesting concept. That'll keep me up tonight thinking about that what you literally just said about HIPAA. And I'm like,
Good point. As well as the juxtaposition of sickler and warrior. You know how you said one is very empowering and the other one is like you're already lost. Like that's an interesting dichotomy too. That's the way that you said it. I was like, that's very cool. I like that. And I wonder if whoever came up with the word warrior did it on purpose almost. It seems like it's almost purposeful. You know what I mean?
Like,